بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. This is our last part in the series on dealing with COVID-19. Inshallah, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless its completion and to make the advice beneficial for those who are listening. Ameen. And this is arguably the most important discussion, which is the spiritual effect that this virus has had on our homes, that has had on our masajid, and that has had on us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again to protect us and to protect our families. Ameen. So one of the most important aspects that I will talk about is the individual effect. And I'd like to start with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. That the east and the west belong to Allah. Wherever you turn, there is His face. Allah is all-pervading and all-knowing. So regardless of where the Muslim is, anywhere in the world, or wherever he is in his locality, whether it be in his workplace or whether it be in the masjid or whether it be at his home, that he has out of the infinite mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ability to worship Him. We are not restricted to a particular time. We are not restricted to a particular place. And there are, a handful of places that we are prohibited, in performing certain actions and certain type of remembrances and dua. But in general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the entire earth for us a place of prayer, as comes in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this might affect an individual's daily prayers. At our masjid, for example, a number of people, they come for Salatul Dhuhr during their work break, or they'll come for Salatul Jummah, as unfortunately we'll be missing out on today because of the cancellation. But now this forces a lot of people to re-examine their dynamic and re-examine their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This safe space that they once had to worship Him has been taken away. So how many of us will have the confidence now to stand and pray in our workplaces, or even if we have enough people, and obviously the most lenient opinion being that of the Ahnaf, where they say you need a minimum of 4, including the Imam. Imagine if I have 4 or 5 people in my workplace and I decide to start making Jumu'ah there. So it is an opportunity for some, and it is something that is definitely scary. It's definitely fearful. I remember my children having this conversation with them when they had to start praying in school, and they had said to me, they said, we feel uncomfortable, and I was like, I completely understand that, and they were very surprised, and they said, well, why would you be uncomfortable? Why are you scared, Baba? I said, I don't like anybody looking at me praying. I feel very uncomfortable doing it, but I said, why do we still do it? And, they responded, and alhamdulillah, I'm very happy with their response when they said to me, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to. So it is definitely a challenge, and this is a new dynamic that maybe some people never had to face before, and it is a new challenge, and this is a new way of testing us. This is a new way of testing our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in expressing our religion in our different workplaces. The khataras that were happening at the masjid, obviously those are going to be taken away now, because this is our daily connection that we had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in drawing near to Him via means of seeking knowledge, or via small lessons that we would remember, or small things that we would take away from our local imam or khatib, or whoever the speaker happened to be. Well, this is an opportunity for many masajid now to move into this virtual space. There are many masajid that didn't even explore this space before, and now they're forced to because of the lack of attendance. So this is something that I would encourage all individuals to do, to start seeking out these virtual spaces so that they can get their daily dose of knowledge, so that they can get that daily reminder. And I would also encourage masajid and administration and imams to start moving into that virtual space so that it becomes occupied, so that it becomes flooded, so that people have a choice on what they can listen to, and the availability of different lessons. One of the last things, or one of the other lessons I would definitely take away from this is the power of dua. And it's not something that we should look upon lightly. The dua is a multifaceted tool. It is something that shows our individual weakness, something as small, something as we would never have imagined, as small as this virus affecting our entire community, or affecting the entire world as a whole. And this is something that we really should ponder and think about, that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has really created us weak, that we made mankind weak, and this is a sign of our weakness. And our weakness is both in a spiritual sense, it's in a physical sense, it's in a mental sense. We are very fragile creatures, and because of this fragility, we really need to return back to our Creator Azza wa Jal, because He's the only one that can really remove this bala, who can remove this calamity from us, who can remove this waba, who can remove this plague from us. And again, I ask Allah to protect us from that. And when I mean a multifaceted tool, I mean in the sense that we recognize our own weakness, we recognize the strength and the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we recognize that He is the only one that can change all of these things. And when we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, this empowers us, this empowers the Muslim, because he recognizes that he truly is a slave. And he recognizes that he truly does not have ability, and he truly recognizes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone is the one that can change anything. So, along the lines of dua, you have adhkar, you have there's a liturgy, there's a wird that the Muslim can come up with during this time. So any of the brothers and sisters, if there's an amount of Quran that you want to read, if there's certain adhkar that you want to read, if there's certain dua that you had memorized, whether they be prophetic or not, this is a great time of utilizing that space and utilizing that time, because we have a lot of time for ourselves, and this is a great opportunity for khalwa with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in being alone with Him. How many of us have developed that personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's now, many of us are forced to. We had a communal relationship with Him, in the sense that, I would come to the masjid, or I would come and listen to the khatras, or I would listen to the reminders and the khutab, and, I would pray in jama'ah. But did I really, on a personal level, develop a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in having these sessions of solitude where I'm in ponderance and I'm remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It really is a great opportunity. It can be very spiritually uplifting for every single one of us, for the ones who actually sit down and utilize it. And there are a number of ways of doing that. Adhkar is a very common one. Dua, having conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is another very common one. Or reflecting over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words, reflecting over his ayat, his verses, reflecting over His names, Azza wa Jal. These are all a number of great ways of returning back to our Creator, Azza wa Jal. And because we have to implement this social distancing, it's being forced upon us, this is something that we should actually, it's something that we should seek favor in. It is something that we should enjoy when we have those opportunities to be alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even though we might be in this constricting situation, there are still many glimmers of light, and I really think that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to seek out those glimmers of light, seek out those happy moments, where we can be alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is very rare that our minds are not busy, or it is very rare that we have to force ourselves to be physically away from other people. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created that opportunity for all of us, and I hope that we are all able to seize it, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq. This next part is something I had touched on before, and the reason I'm leaving it at the end, because obviously not everybody's in the ability to do that, but the opportunity to give sadaqah. For those who are able to still maintain their jobs, and those who are not so involved in the labor and the retail sectors, they are still receiving a steady stream of income, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase them. And for those individuals who have lost their jobs, or those individuals who are going through financial difficulty now, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease upon them and to make it easy for them. So the financial part of this, I think a lot of institutions, they really need to step up their financial aid programs. They really need to streamline a lot of things. Maybe come up with the application process if you haven't done so already. Come up with the screening process if you haven't done so already. I think this is a great way for us to outreach to other masajid in the community to see what it is that they're doing. Even reaching out to local religious organizations or welfare organizations, and see how it is that they have their setup going on, and then kind of mimic some of those standards and procedures and applying it within our institutions, within our Islamic institutions. Having a financial aid officer and appointing, maybe a handful, because now they might have to interact with individuals, they might have to interact with people. So you want to have like maybe 2 or 3 people who are able to maintain some of those social distancing policies that the CDC has put forward. So again, it's an opportunity for those individuals who have money. It's an opportunity for those individuals who might not necessarily be in a position of financial strength, but they can still give time to the masjid, or give time to a local financial aid corporation, or anything that's going on. Meals on Wheels is actually running a program within our township where they're going out and they're handing out meals to needy families. And this is something as a community that I would really highly recommend, and I think it's a great opportunity because there are still a lot of wonderful volunteer opportunities out there. And if that is your way of spiritual fulfillment, if that is the way that you need to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then seize it. I really remind everyone to seize those opportunities that bring them fulfillment and bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Kullu muyassar lima khuliqa la." that it is easy for an individual to do that which he was created for. So if there is something that you enjoy, I highly recommend you go out and you seek it, and because you will receive the most fulfillment of that. So really seize it and take advantage of it. So you know, it's very important to do all of those things. And there was a couple things I had wanted to mention the dua that I had forgotten, but just an example of different dua that you can make. La ilaha illa ant subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin, saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, Allahu akbar, alhamdulillah. All of these are different dua that the individual can make. These are all an opportunity, you know, to set it down that I want to say this dua this many times today, and I want to do it at this time because logistically this is what works out best for you. Again, something I highly recommend, or I want to read this amount of Quran, you know, things that I would highly recommend, you know, for myself, for my family, and for others. Which leads us now into the congregational problems, or the congregational spiritual crisis that we are facing because of this. And the main one and the biggest one being Jummah. There's a lot of emotional attachment around this. There's a huge emotional charge around this issue. And if we look back, you know, through the what the classical scholars have to say concerning this issue, and is, you know, specifically amongst the Shafi'i, you find a lot of nice quotes concerning on how to deal with a flood situation, and this is much more dangerous than a flood. A flood is many times you can just avoid that area, but they had stopped Jummah. The rulings had come to stop Jummah during a flood situation. So this is not something that is unlike that. You know, this is something that is very dangerous. You have a number of imam scholars and you know, du'at who are saying that, okay, you know, the Jummah should not be stopped, and there are a number of reasons that they bring. One of them saying that the hadith of the plague, where the Prophet ﷺ said, you know, don't enter a place where a plague has befallen, and do not allow anyone from that area to exit it. They said even places that the plague had befallen, you know, they were still holding salah, they were still holding Jummah. My answer to that is that, well, they didn't understand the mechanism of transmission. So if they don't understand how a particular disease is transmitted, then they are just going to follow the religious guidelines that they have there. But now we have medical guidelines, we have health guidelines, because even the opportunity, or even the situation where we know that the Prophet ﷺ understood or had an idea about the mechanism of transmission of disease, which was leprosy, he ﷺ, he didn't touch that person, and he didn't allow himself to be touched. So if we know with surety on how a particular disease is to be transmitted, or how a particular disease is transmitted, then it's very easy for us to avoid those diseases. So it's very important for us to keep that in mind when we look at these different nusus, when we look at these different texts, that we can't look at them very superficially. We have to understand the meaning behind them. We have to understand that each of them has depth and each of them has context. Another thing that I had heard from one of the imams, and this is again very unfortunate, is that he said, well, you know, people are still going to Costco, people are still going to work, so I don't see the need to close, you know, the masjid for Jummah. So the response to that is, okay, well, the need for an individual to go to work is so that he can earn. And why does he earn? Is because he has to pay rent, so he needs a place to stay, he needs a place to maintain, he needs to feed his family. If an individual stops going to the masjid, what is going to happen? And I understand that this is a very hard question, this is a very difficult question, but the reality is that, well, he's going to stop going to the masjid. The only obligation that he will not be able to fulfill, and even for that is a substitute, is Salatul Jummah. So if we look at Salatul Jama'ah, which is praying in congregation, there is no madhab. There is no madhab that says that praying Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid is an obligation. There's nobody that says that. There's no madhab that claims that. There is a difference of opinion on whether praying in Jama'ah is an obligation or not, but that is a separate question, and that can be done at home. But in general, there is an agreement amongst all the madhahib that praying Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid is a sunnah mu'akkada. It is an established sunnah, something that the Prophet ﷺ regularly did. And I don't mean to belittle it in any way, shape, or form. It has its importance, it has its virtue, and I'm sure every one of you understands that. But the reality is that it is not an obligation. So if an individual is not fulfilling, if he's not doing sunnah mu'akkada and he's still establishing his prayer, he is still fulfilling his obligation, and he does not need to go to the masjid to do that. And as for the Jummah, well, this is an exceptional case. I am not saying, and I don't think anybody's saying is that Jummah needs to stop. No, nobody's saying that. Walillahi alhamd. There are still places in the world where this plague has not hit as hard, or has not hit at all, or has not touched, and they are still establishing the Salatul Jummah in those places. And there are a handful of selected individuals who are still establishing the Salatul Jummah. And inshallah, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless them and to bless those who are avoiding because of the sake of spreading disease, to reward all of them, because some of them are still maintaining the rituals and the rites of this religion, and some of them are protecting the Muslims. All of these individuals are blessed. All of these individuals is blessed. But those individuals who are still making Jum'ah in places that where this disease is still present, I find it to be very emotionally charged. I find it to be very irresponsible, and I really recommend, and I highly recommend and push and suggest that these places stop holding Jummah, because they are breeding grounds for this disease. They just had this ijtima in Malaysia, and they're actually pinpointing that that is the actual starting place of where the disease began to spread like wildfire. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again to protect us, our families, and our communities. Ameen. Saying that, this actually leads into something a little bit more terrifying and a little bit more, a little scarier, and that is that this disease might actually continue into Ramadan, meaning that we will not be having Ramadan activities, and this is something that I want everybody to mentally prepare for. Does it mean Ramadan will stop? Absolutely. Ramadan, will always be in the hearts of the Muslims. Everything that we do will continue. It will just not be done in a congregational basis. So we need to be ready to break fast with our families. We need to be ready to pray with our families. Even if it means to make Salat al-Taraweeh in the home. And this is something that, with the difference of opinion concerning it, that it is afdal. It is afdal. It is better to make Salat al-Taraweeh in the home. And to make the tahajjud and qiyam al-layl, to make the salawat in your house, it is better than coming and praying in the masjid. It is better for the person to pray in the masjid if he knows he's not going to do those things in his home. But now we are forced, and we probably will be forced. And again, this is something I want to mentally prepare my community for, and all the communities throughout the United States, that there's a very good chance that this disease, and may Allah protect us from it, will continue through Ramadan. Meaning that there's not going to be any iftar dinners, meaning that there's not going to be any Salat al-Taraweeh, meaning there's not going to be any i'tikaf, and this is something that really pains me. The first Jummah that I had to cancel, I never had imagined in my life that I would be making istikhara to cancel Salat al-Jummah. It is something that I took for granted every single week, and I just imagined that it was something that was coming weekly, and something that I would be making weekly, and I would be giving a khutbah weekly. And when it was taken away, it really struck me. It really struck me like lightning, and I had never imagined that they would be taken away. But now is the time for us to reflect and to really look back and say, think how important was Jummah in my life, and how many people can look back now and say, well, I wasted my Jummah. And it is a two-way conversation. Whenever I talk about wasting Jummah, a lot of people want me to talk about the adab and the manners of attending the khutbah, and how you shouldn't be checking your Facebook and your WhatsApp and your Instagram and your Snapchat. And I agree, obviously all of those things are wrong, and you should be listening to the khatib, but I find it very rare that people are actually addressing the khutbah, the people who are giving the khutbah. How many times have I attended a khutbah where I didn't even understand what the khatib was talking about? I didn't understand what the topic was. I didn't understand what the point of the khutbah was. He was just up there talking for a half hour, and sometimes these khatibs, they'll go for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, or even longer. And then having the expectation from the Jama'at to listen to you, I find that completely unfair. I find it completely unfair. It should be relevant, it should be poignant, it should be well spoken, it should be something that the people can relate to. And if there's a small percentage of the population that doesn't listen, I think that's very natural. But if I'm not doing my due diligence and my full duty as a khatib of giving a good khutbah, then I have failed my community. I have failed my community. I have failed my Jama'ah, and they are only half to blame. They are only half to blame because I did not do what I was supposed to do. And this Jum'ah issue has become something that's extremely charged. I look around and I see so many different people and so many different imams finding and working and trying different ways to try and substitute it and still try to be listened to and still try to be relevant. And I reach out and I would really want to address all of those imams and all those khatibs. Why is it that you are so adamant when you yourselves have been sharing fatwa on being excused for Jummah? If these individuals and these people can be excused for Jummah, why are we so adamant in having it? Why is it so important that we have it? Is it because your power base is crumbling around you? Or is it because you feel the need so much to be heard? And this is something I'm terrified about. I'm really scared on the emotional charge and the emotional response that we're having from some of these khatibs and some of these scholars, in that they're completely adamant in having this when they themselves understand that there's a religious exception for this. And again, this is something I strongly encourage. Please, 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 if you have not closed your masjid yet, I implore you to close it. Are you ready? And I know there are individuals who have come up to me and said, well, I'm not worried about myself. And even me, in complete honesty, from the symptoms that I have heard, walillahi alhamd, I'm generally healthy. My children, alhamdulillah, are generally healthy. And even if we contract it, and I ask Allah to protect us, I imagine ourselves recovering from it. And the recovery rate, walillah alhamd, is relatively high for this. The thing I am worried about is this disease carrying over to people who are not healthy, people who are immunocompromised. So while I might be accountable and I might be able to stand for myself and claim for myself that I can handle it, I can deal with it, I will take the risks, I am not willing to take responsibility for someone else. Is any one of us ready to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say that I am the reason that killed him? And we have similar hadith where there was a man who had a huge wound and he was junub. He had a wet dream. He was in a state of sexual impurity. So one of the companions, they commanded him. They said, you have to make ghusl. After he made ghusl, he died. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said they killed him. They said they killed him. Qatalahumullah. Yani may Allah kill them. And this doesn't mean that whenever the Prophet ﷺ would curse someone, he would curse a companion. It was out of emotion, and he ﷺ explains it in different other hadith where it's actually a dua for them. But it was just his extreme anger that he ﷺ said that, do we want to be in that position? Are we ready to take that responsibility where I am now standing saying that I am the one that killed this person, I killed this brother, or I killed this sister, wa na'udhu billah. And may Allah protect us and give us the understanding and the enlightenment to understand the ramifications of what we say and what we do. Which leads us into another type of social, spiritual type of setup, which is Salat al-Janazah. The CDC has put forward guidelines saying that there's no proof to show, or there's no evidence to show that the disease can be transferred when dealing with a dead body. The orifices are generally covered. I spoke to a funeral director concerning this, but usually they cover the mouth and they'll cover the rear end with cotton to make sure that, just in case, and obviously please make sure that any medics and funeral directors and people who are in the field, let them handle the body. They are down to very minimal staff because they don't want exposure to that. And then this leads to, okay, who can attend the janazah now? So just imagine, a family member dying during this time, and you or two or three other people are able to attend the janazah, and as a community, we're not able to console those individuals. So I think it's very important for us to work a network, or create a network at this point, where if we hear that somebody has passed in the community, where the community can at least call, they can at least reach out to that person who has passed away in order to console them. And again, this is very much part of our religion, but just imagine, what we are suggesting and what we're telling people is that the janazah, the body should be washed at the washing facility, taken straight to the graveyard, and the janazah made over there with a minimum number of people. But the consolation that happens afterward, this is a communal responsibility, and I think it's something that's very challenging and something that we really need to look into and something we really need to think about. This is in addition to pastoral care. I mean, there are marriages that people still want to get married. There are still other things going on in the community, and we have to make sure that we follow CDC guidelines when we are dealing with this, trying to keep it to the absolute bare minimum, recommending delaying marriages if possible, and other functions. People are still having children, people are still having aqiqas, people are still having other functions. Some kids are finishing their recitation of the Quran, and people like to have parties after that, or some people might be graduating soon and people want to have parties for that. And it's very unfortunate that as a community we can't come together and share in their happiness during those times. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow this to pass quickly so that we're all able to share in that happiness once again. Which leads us to the last group, which is the individual families. So the individual families now, and I had mentioned this before, that this is a great opportunity for us to check their Islamic literacy and to check our own Islamic literacy. Sitting down and actually discussing with them and talking to them about different Islamic concepts. I think this is a great chance to do that. This is a great chance also to have a tadabbur session where we ponder over the Quran. So I was actually meeting with, and I'm sure the people in my community, they've already heard this a number of times, but I was sitting down with a bunch of clergy one time, a bunch of rabbis and a bunch of priests, and I had asked them, I said, what do you guys do to maintain your religiosity? So what one of the pastors actually said to me was something that was really interesting. He goes to me, he said, well, we have Bible study. And I asked him, well, what's Bible study? What do you guys do? He said, basically, every night when we sit down, we have dinner, I open up the Bible, I read a verse, and we talk about that verse. And I was shocked. I was completely shocked. And this is one of the, well, I won't say one of the few times, but one of the many times in my life where I felt like a complete idiot. I was absolutely amazed that this non-Muslim, with a book that we believe to be untrue, is spending so much time studying and reviewing this book with his children when this is something that is completely foreign to us? When was the last time any of us, as a father or a mother, opened up the Quran, read a verse, read the translation, and asked our children, okay, how do you feel about that? What do you think about this verse? What do you think this verse is saying? What do you think Allah is saying to you? How is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to us? What are some benefits we can take from this verse? And I'm not asking the people to do tafsir. I'm not. Tafsir is something that's different. But what is my emotional experience with this verse is something that everybody's completely capable of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He even tells us, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمَّا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not ponder over the Quran, or is it that they have locks on their hearts? And these locks, they have stages. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He calls them locks, meaning a number of locks over them. And every time we sit down with the book of Allah, maybe, just possibly, Allah will unlock one of those locks and open up our heart to the Quran. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who develops a relationship with His book. Because one of the best gauges for an individual to judge his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is judging his relationship with His book. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq, and I hope these reminders are beneficial, and I hope that they really do reach our hearts and allow us to become better Muslims during this time of hardship, and really allow us to appreciate the good times that have passed. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he even reminds us that one of the times that an individual should benefit from is from his health before he is sick. And as a community, we can really feel this, and we're feeling the impact of this. And inshallah, bi'idhnillah, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it quick, when we are all in a state where everybody is healthy again, that we really look back at this time and we reflect and we benefit from it, and we really appreciate the adversity and the difficulty Allah has put us through. Because up until now, things have been relatively easy, things have been relatively smooth, we've been living in relative peace, walillahi alhamd. And this is the first time where this type of calamity has reached almost every single home. So please, take it in as an opportunity to better ourselves and better our community. Inshallah, when we come out of this, we will be a better, stronger, and more efficient community. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin. Nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wa jazakum khair.